one note is off, it eventually destroys the whole symphony, David.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. 2 months ago, Court TV put up a video strongly suggesting Gary Oliver is the murderer of JonBenet Ramsey and describing his confession in the title of their video as new, and that was 2 months ago. I do wonder, is America's most famous case unsolved because of memory loss? And I'm not joking when I say that. Since that story on Court TV, there's been no follow-up from Court TV or anywhere else. I mean, you've got a confession in one of the biggest cases in American true crime history, and you get almost 1 million views, and then you just don't deal with it again. You know, there's been no arrest, and also no real analysis on whether the information was accurate to begin with. Why wouldn't you keep investigating this if you were Court TV? Why wouldn't you keep at it? So their story, which has been viewed, as I say, over 850,000 times, it may well cross the 1 million view milestone in the next month. But of course, Court TV has moved on since the video to greener pastures, and so has its audience. And that's how true crime tends to work these days. Post a relatively random fragment, use a shocking but dubious title, and then move on to the next story. So what is the alternative? What happens when you stick with a story and really try to work out the reality of it? It turns out exactly 20 years ago today, well, plus 1 month, on October 21st, Boulder PD sent an internal memo. This is page 1. Well, we're going to deal with the rest of this memo, but first I'm going to ask you if you've subscribed to this channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, on page 2 of this memo, sent from, and by the way, it's authored by the Boulder District Attorney Investigator JonBenet. I think he arrived on the scene before James Kolar. There's a name you probably recognize. And the title of this memo is a 4-month summary. In other words, it's a summary of what he was doing for the 4 months prior to October 21st, 2003. And guess what? On page 2, out of 40 individuals, the memo highlights just 2, Gary Oliver and James Selby. The memo notes, quote, "A background investigation of Gary Oliver has proffered proof these persons were not responsible and have been eliminated." It also notes that Gary Oliver, until 2003, was, quote, "high on the list of possible suspects," end quote. And obviously it's possible suspects in terms of this whole intruder theory, strangers who could have done something to JonBenet Ramsey. It's no wonder that folks in true crime find things like identity and motive and the whole fabric so difficult to deal with, because they're led to expect quick, overly simple, relatively random answers that don't really connect to anything else, not cohesively and not in an integrated way. Of course, when you do your homework, it turns out the new confession from Oliver has actually been recycled several times in the news from as long ago as 2001. That's 22 years ago. Also, one has got to assume that John Ramsey or someone affiliated with him contacted the Sun to share the photo of Gary Oliver at a vigil. And, you know, that is something that the Sun reporter mentions, except I must say I found footage of Gary Oliver online at a totally different source. So that's an important bit of information as well. I mean, if you think about John Ramsey, was interviewed by Court TV, he's incentivized for the shade to fall on some intruder type suspect. I mean, John was originally a suspect in terms of this case, and he was part of the whole grand jury investigation. So whether he's innocent or not, but let's just say if he's innocent, he would obviously, it's in his interest to have shade fall on some intruder type suspect. And the question then is Gary Oliva, does he make sense? And I'm sure John Ramsey is an intelligent man. But then the question is, if we are being intelligent about our true crime analysis, is Gary Oliva a true, credible suspect? Well, first of all, this memo shows otherwise. Second of all, the media narrative shows otherwise. So you see as early as 2003 that Boulder PD, within 6 years of the whole case, Boulder PD have said, we've looked into Gary Oliva and we've excluded him. On the other hand, if you head to a website that's been around for decades, A Candy Rose, there's an incredible archive of information on the Ramsey case there that would otherwise have been lost. Well, that is where you find the picture of Gary Oliva at a vigil, and that is hardly news. That came out in a news story on the 4th of October 2002, 48 Hours Investigates. And then when the photo appears in a news story and then that photo then gets reposted onto Court TV as the sort of exclusive, something that we apparently have never seen before, while it's actually more than 20-year-old news. According to The Sun, they say now, however, one of Gary Oliva's former high school schoolmates, Michael Vale, is urging Boulder PD investigators to take a second look at Oliva and what he thinks are the stark circumstances tying evidence of him to the crime. Well, why does he need to do it now when he's done it many times in the past? And as I say, this image of Gary Oliva came up in the media narrative in 2002. That's not now, that's in the past. And it has been dealt with, as you see in that memo, which is dated 2003. Does that make sense? So also, what is more than a little tricksy about this is the idea that the police didn't know or don't know about Oliva. You hear that narrative being repeated over and over again. The police are blamed as inept, blamed as being ignorant, but between 1996 and now, the police have known about Oliva. The police have cleared him. And one of the reasons why is they tested his DNA about 20 years ago. So how could police not know about him if he was all over the news in 2016 in the 20th anniversary here? There's another article dated 2001-05-21, so I guess it's the 21st of May. And it was published in the Rocky Mountain News. It's titled, Smith Offers Suspect List in JonBenet's Slaying. It's a 22-year-old story. This is an excerpt from that article. A man who showed up at a memorial service for JonBenet a year after her death. The man has a criminal history, including the essay of a 7-year-old girl in Oregon, Gray said. And Gray is the investigator for John Ramsey. Records indicate the man once tried to do this and that. He's arrested on an unrelated charge in December. Officials found a stun gun. Gray said that Boulder police may be conducting DNA analysis on the man. Well, guess what? They did. In some ways and in some instances, this article from 2002 is word for word the same story, certainly the same gist, as the quote-unquote exclusive scoop published earlier this year in The Sun on Gary Oliva. It's dated the 14th of October 2002. CBS 48 Hours Investigate Searching for a Killer. And this is an excerpt. Erin Moriarty says, why do they believe he was in the neighborhood the night JonBenet died? Michael, that's Michael Vale. Well, he called me on the phone, Erin Moriarty, because of this man and a phone call he got from Gary Oliva. And Michael then said, he related to me that he had done something horrible. Well, when you dig into the details, it turns out that the knowledge of what had happened to JonBenet Ramsey made him think about, when he was confronted about this, he said, no, well, he was thinking about something horrible that he did to a girl in Oregon. Now, I'm assuming that the police did contact Vale in 2002 because Vale appeared on television in October 2002. And then you have that memo coming out in 2003 with Gary Oliva's name in it, high on the list of possible suspects, but by that stage eliminated. Then there's another article about, or another more press coverage of Gary Oliva in December 2004, the 18th of December 2004. Also, CBS 48 Hours Mystery. Again, Erin Moriarty speaking to Gary Oliva. Did you hurt JonBenet Ramsey? Gary Oliva says no. And then he also says, the police, in this episode, he says, they told me I'm clear. The law enforcement told me I'm clear. And you've got that in writing in that memo, in a memo dated October 2003, a couple of months before this 48 Hours Mystery, which means Gary Oliva is telling the truth, that they had cleared him. And this is already established 19 years ago. The other point to make is that John Ramsey's investigators knew about Gary Oliva. So if Oliva was such a dead ringer for a suspect, why is he only coming onto the media radar now? And hasn't he fallen off the radar again? Will we see him again around Christmas time this year? Now, a far better documentary on the Ramsey case is the one dropped by CNN 9 days ago. I've provided part 1 of 10 mistakes made. That deals with the first 20 minutes. Would you guys like me to do the next 10 in terms of that? And I do want to say, every time we deal with the intruder narrative or a supposed suspect like Gary Oliva, we are not dealing with the other narrative. So it obviously suits certain people. All the time that you're spending dealing with and debunking this intruder suspect and that intruder suspect, well, you're not dealing with the flip side of the story. And so that is in part what the CNN special report deals with. It's informative, it's factual, one of the very few that interviewed John Ramsey quite extensively, but without sucking up to him. Well, that one has got barely 75,000 views, when the report about Gary Oliva, which is dubious at best, has got more than 10 times as many views. I have tried to draw attention to this documentary, which has been out for some time, but has only been released publicly fairly recently. It's a good documentary, but it isn't without flaws. And so in the next analysis, we're going to deal with another 10 mistakes in dealing with the final 20 minutes of the documentary. So look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.